So really, I'd just like to start off by expressing appreciation for all of our players, our coaches, and our football operations staff. This year was a very challenging season. Every NFL season is challenging, and just quite honestly, given the impact of the global pandemic, it made it that much more difficult for all the people in our building. And we had a number of individuals that just made incredible sacrifices. Their families made incredible sacrifices, and everyone was just such a huge part in allowing us to accomplish some pretty special things, this season. So I couldn't be prouder of our entire group. The second group I really wanted to acknowledge is really just our fans who are just, quite honestly, they're incredible. And I'm so excited as we head into 2021, God willing, we have a little bit more of a normal fall to have, really all the Browns faithful back in First Energy Stadium supporting the team. But even virtually, remotely, you name it, we really have the best fans in the league. And they were incredibly supportive throughout the fall. So looking forward to next year in that regard. So with that, I'll open up for any questions.
Thank you very much, AB. Our first question will go to Mary Kay Cabot.
Yes, Andrew, can you just address you guys coming as far as you did going into that game? And I know how you guys felt heading into it. I know the whole team felt, you felt, and Kevin all felt like this was a winnable game and you guys should be heading to the AFC Championship. So what did it feel like to not be able to accomplish that goal?
I think it's natural, Mary Kay, for everybody to feel a little bit of disappointment. I won't lie that it stung on Sunday night. It stung into Monday. And it's probably just recently worked its way fully through my system. So, I guess reflecting back on the game, ultimately we just, we were unable to, make the critical plays in big moments that would allow us to advance. It's a huge credit to Kansas City and, Andy Reid and his staff. They did a phenomenal job, but it certainly gives us something to aspire to as we enter the off season. And certainly doesn't take away from what the group was able to accomplish, throughout the season.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Kay. Our next question will go to Nate Ulrich.
Hey, Andrew. Along those lines, I'm thinking about Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, the quarterbacks left in your conference, the final four teams in the divisional round. How much do you have to consider those guys and, kind of plan for them, this off season when you're trying to put together a defense that's going to allow you guys to get where you want to go?
Nate, it's a good question. And obviously all three of those quarterbacks, they are fantastic players that are likely going to be in the league for the next decade. But that being said, when we really go into off-season planning and roster building, it's not to build a team to defend against one individual player, or quite honestly, one individual team. There are 31 other organizations, NFL teams that are all highly competitive. And ultimately, we have to beat all 31 if we're going to reach our ultimate goal of winning a Super Bowl. So our focus is really just putting together the best team, possible that we can year in and year out, as opposed to maybe catering it to any specific opponent.
As a follow-up, I know you're going to try to improve your roster in every which way you can, but, looking at your first off season as GM, the biggest investments were made on offense, right? With a couple of splashy free agent moves and the 10th overall pick. Is it fair to say that, the defense will be more heavily invested in this year?
Nate, you cut me off on my stock answer.
Well, I know.
all positions. So in fairness, these next couple of weeks, we're really going to go through a full self-assessment, not just roster, but football operations scheme, you name it, to make sure that we have a really good beat in terms of our planning entering the offseason. I think it's a fair observation to realize that, the resources this past year that we had going into this past fall were predominantly oriented to support the offense and support the quarterback. But that doesn't mean that we didn't make, some investments all across the team. We can have improvement anywhere. understand that obviously, we think we can certainly boost the defense as we go into 2021. But it's probably too early to make any declarative or definitive statements. But certainly understand the strengths and weaknesses of the team.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nate. We'll go to Scott Petrick.
Hey, Andrew. With the cap expected to go down because of the pandemic, how does that affect your approach to offseason, whether it's retaining some of your free agents, signing guys to extensions that are eligible?
Yeah, I won't, mislead you, Scott. That does play into, all the decisions. And part of it is because we really don't know precisely what the cap is going to be heading into 2021. Certainly we have a floor, but a number of different factors can affect what that, really what that final threshold is. You're looking at the salary cap sport, that does affect player acquisition. It does affect retention, and it affects maybe some sequencing and timing in regards to both of those, both of those processes. So it will play a role in our off-season planning. That's that's part of the challenge for all NFL front offices. It makes it hard, but that's also the job. And we look forward to attacking that challenge and hopefully doing a really nice job. Call it 8-9 months from now.
I guess the flip side of that is if it affects other teams maybe more than you guys because you have a pretty good cap situation, do you feel like there'll be more players available, whether it's free agency or trade, that you might be able to acquire?
I think it's too early to know the impact, Scott. I think that's certainly a possibility. But it's not only just this year, but it's also about cap projections in future years, and quite honestly, how different positional markets move over the course of the spring. Needless to say, we'll be monitoring everything, and we do think that we'll be well positioned regardless of where the final number lies this season. But we're ready to go. We're prepared to pivot whether we may need to do so.
Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. Daryl Ryder is next.
Hey, Andrew. I know some others have touched on the defensive side of the ball, and that last offseason, you did a lot of one-year contracts on that side of the ball. I think there was only one player, and it was a 2-year deal. So combined with the salary cap situation from the league office, how aggressive can you be, this offseason and giving longer, more commitment-like deals to free agents?
I don't think the cap or really anything would preclude us from making any long-term commitments really in any phase, Daryl. I think we're also very mindful to make sure it's not just giving out a long-term deal for the sake of giving out long-term deals. Like, you also want the match, the skill set, the fit, everything to work with what we're aiming for. And that's not just for the defense. That's really across the roster. But I don't believe that we'll go into the spring and have, call it cumbersome restraints in terms of our cap planning across the roster. But we're obviously going to be really deliberate over the next few weeks in mapping out a strategy that will hopefully help allow us to win 3 more games next year.
You guys will have the 26th pick. It's been a long, long time since the Browns have picked that late in a first round, and that's obviously, a good thing. That means you had a successful season. But I wanted to ask you about the combine changes and the challenges that's going to present you as you go through yet another abnormal evaluation process here, especially with everything that college football had to go through. And now, you're going to be even further distanced, I guess, in having to do these evaluations in a virtual setting. Could you speak on that, please?
I don't know. Maybe I'm naive or underestimating it. I don't really think it's going to be that big of a deal, Daryl. I mean, we went through a whole spring where it was virtual, really on the fly, mid-process. Now at this point, right, all of us know how to use Zoom, right? All of us know how to use Zoom and FaceTime. The reality is the combine, you're still going to get the medical information. I think the league's done a nice job in really organizing that. We did a ton of player virtual interviews last spring. It seems like that will continue into this year. We'll be able to ascertain the physical measurable data that we need. I don't see any reason that we can't work through the spring and again have a nice process in place and have a high quality draft. So I don't really see that as an impediment at all.
Thank you, Daryl. Tom Withers, you're up.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it. As far as Baker is concerned, you saw a lot of progress in him this year. Is it fair to assume you guys will pick up that option, and will you talk to him about a long-term contract extension?
I was warned that I may get this question today. So
Guilty.
So I think you guys know me well enough at this point that in terms of contracts, I don't think that this is really the appropriate forum to really talk about those decisions. I think that that's something that's a little bit more personal to me, the player and the agent. What I can tell you is really I echo the comments I had last week with Baker. I think he did an excellent job this year, right? He led us to a first playoff appearance in eons. He got 12 wins, played winning football all year, developed a really strong relationship with Kevin and the offensive staff. And really, like I mentioned last week, he really grew before our eyes on a weekly basis, both on and off the field. So we're very, very pleased with him. Look, we wouldn't be where we were at the end of the season without his performance, and he had a really strong season.
And if I could ask you about number 95, he played with what looked like to be a pretty serious injury during the game on Sunday. How did he come out of it, Andrew?
Yeah, he really gutted through an injury that we've actually had several guys that have finished games with it and then missed some time afterwards. But it's nothing that should really impact his availability as we go into the offseason. He'll heal up, he'll be ready to go, and he had a great year.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Our next question comes from Tony Grossi.
Hey, Andrew. Shortly after you took over the job a year ago, you guys collectively made the commitment to Myles Garrett because without any question, you wanted him to be part of your future. Have you not made that decision on the quarterback yet?
Like I said earlier, Tony, I'm not going to go into the specifics. I will go back to my answer before. We're really happy with Baker. We wouldn't be where we were without his performance this year. And really, it was really the same trajectory with Myles. Obviously, we did his deal in the summer, but it's not something that I really felt comfortable talking through at really any point in the offseason. I just don't think it's the right forum. But we're very pleased with Baker.
All right. So the idea of a quarterback being under his rookie contract gives you some flexibility on your cap and that window is closing. We know because he'll be entering his fourth year. So do you approach this offseason knowing that window has been closed a little bit?
I don't know that I would go that far. And to be honest, it's probably, again, too early to make any comments in that regard, just because we haven't gotten through the entirety of our roster planning and really our plan heading into 2021. But I don't, look, I think we'll have plenty of flexibility regardless of how any of that shakes out. I'm really encouraged in what we'll be able to do this offseason.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Jeff Shadell's next.
Hey, Andrew, I know you want to get better everywhere, but when you look at your defense, would you agree that you really need more speed, the linebacker and in the secondary?
I think probably like a couple different. We could talk through the number of different position groups, but I'll always take more speed up and down the roster, whether it's defense, offense, special teams. This system is certainly predicated on speed. So really the short answer is yes. And I think quite honestly, that answer would be yes in every offseason.
Thank you, Jeff. We'll go to Fred Greetham.
Andrew, congratulations on your season. I had a specific couple players, two key guys you were counting on, Grady Williams and Grant Delpit. Are you confident that Delpit can come back with his speed? And then on Williams, his durability's missed, I think, 22 games in 34. Can you just talk about the confidence in them coming back?
Fred, we are confident in both guys. You never know with significant injuries how that ultimately unfolds. But the one thing I can tell you about Grant and Grady, the way that those two have attacked their approach to rehab, staying engaged with the team, and really they've prepared every week as if they were going to play, even when it became obvious that they weren't. I'm very optimistic, very bullish on their physical recovery, and then ultimately, when they do get back, being able to play at a high level for us. I think those two individuals deserve a ton of credit because that's not easy to go through when, in Grant's case, you're a rookie. In Greedy's case, you're in your second year of your career in the NFL. It can be discouraging when all you want is quick progress, and that's not necessarily happening. But I think both those guys have done a phenomenal job with their rehab, and certainly we look forward to having them in 2025.
Thanks, Fred. Dan Labby, we'll go to you.
Hey, Andrew. I wanted to ask you about a couple guys too. I'll start with this one. First of all, Jarvis is a guy that you were here obviously when he was acquired, and I'm just curious as this thing has kind of turned. What does having a guy like Jarvis around mean, on the field and off?
Jarvis is just a fierce competitor, right? He's obviously very skilled, right? He's versatile, has outstanding hands. He turns into a running back with the ball in his hands after he catches it. But he's also just an outstanding competitor, and that mentality really permeates throughout the offense. So obviously Jarvis was a big part of our success, this season, and look, very, very, very pleased with his impact across the team.
And then the other guy I wanted to ask about was Ronnie Harrison. You added him late, but is he a guy? I don't know what you guys kind of thought you were getting out of him when you acquired him, but is he a guy that you kind of see as a long-term fit now?
I thought Ronnie, he played very well this year, and that's not an easy task, Dan, as you know, for a guy to come in really on the eve of the regular season, learn a new system, and then jump right in and really acclimate and make plays when his number was called upon. I think Ronnie's still 23 years old, probably turns 24 in the off season, but we were excited with what we saw out of Ronnie certainly this year.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Zach Jackson is next.
Hi, Andrew. Just want to ask you, is there a set schedule for what you do in getting ready for free agency, or are you just kind of always ready for things as they come up? Like Coach said, the coaches are off next week.
Mm-hmm.
But, just curious if you have an exact layout of when things are going to happen, or it just flies as it goes.
I'd say a little bit of both. I'll be honest, I am a pretty structured individual. I'm sure if you've talked to some of my coworkers, they'd probably say maybe a little bit to a fault, Zach. But we are prepared. I think preparation allows you to be able to pivot and react to things that maybe were unforeseen at points throughout the year. But the reality is, like, once the trade deadline hits for us, from a front office perspective, a lot of your focus really does start to shift to planning for the next year. So we feel like we're in a good spot as we enter the new year. We still have a long way to go in terms of our planning. And obviously getting with our coaching staff once they have a little bit of time to breathe and relax a little bit. But we're in a good rhythm. We'll be ready to go. We'll be ready to adjust when the inevitable curveballs happen throughout the offseason.
Are you going to the Senior Bowl next week?
I am not. Now, the rules are a little bit different this year, obviously, with the pandemic. We will have a contingent go down there. We'll be ready to go. We'll be all over those guys. So we'll be well represented and get our work done.
Thank you.
Jake Trotter has our next question.
Hey, Andrew, you guys played some of your best ball offensively after Odell suffered the knee injury in week 7. In light of that, where do you see him fitting onto this team moving forward?
Look, I think that, in terms of call it the first half and the second half of the season, I do think that there's just an element of our offense just evolved over the course of the year. I think part of that is just chemistry, time on task, you name it. I think that's really independent of Odell. I've said, multiple times, Odell's a good football player. He acclimated nicely with our program, with Kevin, with his teammates. And quite honestly, I just want as many good football players on the roster as possible. He's dynamic.
You were talking about, Miles' foundational piece. Obviously, I think Baker fits into that category as well. How do you view Nick Chubb and Denzel Ward in terms of potential foundational long-term pieces for this franchise?
Yeah, look, I'd like to keep as many of our good players as long as possible. That's probably the easiest way to say it. Those guys are highly skilled at what they do, and they're great people.
Thanks, Jake. Marla Ridenour, you're up.
Yeah, Andrew, thanks for doing this. I I just want to know, how is Odell doing in his rehab, and maybe if you could update us on some of the other injured guys and, surgeries upcoming or anything like that.
Yeah, we're in a knock on wood, largely a good spot from a health perspective entering the offseason, Marla. I talked with Odell probably, right heading into the first time or the last regular season game playing Pittsburgh, and his rehab's going really well. He's done a nice job with it. He looks great. He's in a good mental spot. And I would say that that's the case for largely our guys, up and down the roster. So it's probably a little bit different than perhaps the team exited coming out of 2019 from a health perspective, but we're certainly optimistic that all of our guys will remain on course with the recovery timelines, and obviously hope to have as many guys back as possible when the offseason program does start.
Because you did take a lot of injuries to the offensive line. Hubbard's, things sounded pretty serious. Those guys, you think going to be okay?
Yeah, we don't anticipate any major, lingering issues into, call it, the summer or camp. Now, look, that can change. It's still early on, but we think we're in a really good spot there, Marla.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marla. Didi Kinkabwala is next.
Hi, we're about a year now from your kind of arranged marriage with Kevin Stefanski. So can you just give us a little insight? Why did it work so well?
I probably pushed back a little bit on the notion, Aditi, of arranged marriage. I think it probably did help that Kevin and I did have, a relationship prior. But I think part of it is just like, Kevin's just a great guy. Like, good guy, easy to work with, good human being, very smart. As I've mentioned multiple times on here, a great sense of humor. And ultimately we are like-minded in terms of how we see things, whether it's football philosophy, how we want football operations to work together, and just our overall approach. Doesn't mean we agree on everything all the time, but we're able to have those discussions and work through any disagreements together. So he's a fantastic partner, and I'm incredibly blessed to be working with him.
This may be a little bit difficult, but after kind of this year together, 11 months, whatever it is there anything that you think the two of you have sort of evolved on philosophically together? Is there something that revealed itself in this last year?
I don't know if it's philosophically. Perhaps I think the biggest evolution is just communication, and I think that's probably the case in really any relationship. Whether it's with your kids, whether it's with your marriage, or your professional relationships. And I think that that's something that just continues to grow and continues to improve over time. But again, I'm very fortunate to have that guy as a partner in crime, so to speak.
Thank you, Didi. Andrew Gribble, you're up.
Yeah, Andrew, I'm just wondering, when you look back at this season, was there maybe, when you look at it, was there a turning point that you saw from your perspective on where this team ultimately became a team that could make it to the second round of the playoffs?
I wish I had a great answer for you on that one, Andrew. I honestly don't. I think part of it is, with the season coming to a close on Sunday, I don't know that I've really gotten to the point where I've been able to reflect in that manner more fully. It really was a little bit of a week to week kind of survive and advance season, just given everything that was going on. But I'm really proud of how the group attacked every day and every challenge that was thrown its way, and showed just that level of resiliency. So I don't know that I could pinpoint a certain moment. I think it's probably more an accumulation of moments and experiences over the course of the year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gribble. Back to Mary Kay Cabot.
Yeah, generally it seems like, especially in the analytics world, that paying running backs isn't usually high on the list of priorities. But not to get specific about what you will or won't do necessarily with Nick, but does he sort of, transcend what a regular really good running back does for a franchise and an organization? And does he mean more to you guys than maybe some running backs might?
It's a good question, Mary Kay. And, again, while I don't think it's necessarily appropriate to get into the specifics of really any contract decisions, we'll make decisions that we think are best with, really our internal discussions. I'm less concerned on, what may be call it the conventional wisdom or thought process out there. We'll do what we think is best within the interest of the Cleveland Browns.
And how does it impact you guys that I understand what you're saying about the combine and everything, but now DeMaurice Smith said yesterday that he believes that you guys are going to have another virtual offseason with virtual OTAs and virtual mini camps.
Mm-hmm.
So how will that impact your thought process and your plans going forward?
I don't know that it'll have a major impact just because we've had plenty of practice at this point, as is, everybody on this call, obviously as well. So I think that we'll be prepared to handle whatever's thrown at us. Look, I think all of us hope that there's maybe at least a little bit of normalcy as we get into the spring. I won't be shy about saying that. But if that's not the case, we'll be able to pivot and we'll be ready to go when training camp starts.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Kay. Nate Ulrich is next.
Andrew, just to clarify, does Miles need surgery on this oblique injury? No. Okay. And then for Olivier Vernon, it seemed like he really, turned it on in the second half of the season, then obviously suffered an unfortunate injury. His contract's up. How do you handle that situation with him? Do you leave the door back open and see, how the comeback goes, or, is it just one of those things where, hey, this is a tough business. He's going to have to kind of make it work somewhere else?
Yeah, I had a good conversation with Ovi actually just yesterday, and I'm heartbroken for him because he did play so well down the stretch and then didn't get a chance to enjoy the playoffs, the playoffs with us, at Pittsburgh and at Kansas City. I guess maybe the way I would answer that question, Nate, and this probably pertains to really all of our free agents. We'll deal with it, really as it goes. You want to retain as many good players as possible. In some situations, it ends up being the right fit. In other situations, it doesn't. But at the same time, that's something that we have the next several weeks to work through. And we really do our best to maintain transparency and good communication with all the guys who have contracts expiring. And we'll continue to do that and work through those as more of what I would call the economic unknowns become known as we get into February and March.
Thank you, Nate. Scott Petrick, you're up.
Andrew, I got a specific one and then kind of a general one for you. With Odell, how much do you think you missed his skill set after he got hurt?
I'd say with Odell, you always want to have someone that talented on the field. So maybe the easy question is you always miss it. He's a great player and he's a dynamic weapon, and we like having dynamic weapons on the field.
And then the general one is just philosophically from the organizational standpoint. Is the goal to sign guys when they still have a year or two left on their contracts? Does that help from a stability standpoint, a cap standpoint?
Yeah, so generally speaking, yes, Scott, we do want to be proactive and aggressive. I talked about being aggressive a year ago, and that also pertains to the contract management side of things. But each situation really is unique, and especially as you really try and put the entire puzzle together, and then on top of that, just obviously the uncertainty over the next few years in terms of where the cap may be. So all those things do get taken into consideration. But yes, more generally, we would like to be first and identify guys early. But that doesn't mean that it'll necessarily be a cookie cutter approach.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Tony Grossi.
Andrew, you signed a lot of players in free agency last year. Do you think now that you're a playoff caliber team that you're more selective and reach for the one or two that might put you over the top?
I think it's too early to tell. I guess a couple things in that line of thinking, Tony. I think the first is every year really is unique and different. I think it can be easy to be lulled into the thought process. All right, we got to the divisional round this year. You just carry over the same team and just poof, you put guys together and you put one or two pieces and then, you go another round or two. And it really, at least in my experience, it has not necessarily worked that way in the NFL. Every year it's just different. The circumstances are different. Every roster has significant turnover. That's just the way of the league, and that's the way that it is in a salary cap sport with 53 guys on the roster. So I don't really go into it with the mindset of like, hey, we reached this point, we just need one or, we're just one or two players away. I don't think any team is just one or two players away, quite frankly. So we'll be open-minded and we'll be adaptable and we'll be flexible with our planning. And again, our goal is to develop as deep of a roster as possible and to have as many high-quality players as possible. So in terms of volume, to maybe your specific question, in terms of volume, too early to say, but I wouldn't necessarily pigeonhole us in either direction.
Okay, and one last thing, you mentioned Delpit and Grady Williams were very engaged during their rehab. Odell took the other approach where he was away from the team, obviously with the team's permission. How did that come about, and why wasn't it necessary for him to rehab with you?
So, I think with Grady and Grant, really the priority there was those are guys who, Grant, this is a rookie year. We thought it was important for him to really stay on site and really go through the daily process of his first NFL season. And again, Grady's a second-year player in a new system. So we really do deal with each of those cases, case by case. They weren't the only guys that stayed on site. Odell wasn't the only guy who rehabbed away. So I wouldn't read into any of that, too deeply at all. Really pleased with all those guys in terms of both their approach and their engagement with the team. But again, those guys are at different points in their career.
Thanks, Tony. We're going to try to get three more in: Jake Trotter, Doug Maurice, and Mary Kay Cabot. Jake.
Andrew, how excited are you about the prospect of bringing back this entire offensive line, given the moves you made to put it together past offseason and then the way that they played together?
Yeah, Jake, I think I love my big guys, so I'm very excited about this. Excited about this group, excited about the work that they did with Bill. I think that's a position group where continuity is of paramount importance. So I think that group did a fantastic job, and look forward to continue to seeing them grow.
You were really aggressive last year, franchise records in terms of guaranteed money. These potential extensions, whether they happen or not, how does that affect how aggressive you can be in free agency, this time around?
Yeah, it all does play a role, Jake, because you're right. The dollars you spend, aren't always in terms of external acquisitions. And really, you really do want to get to a point where a lot of your big activity in free agency is more in terms of retaining your core. You can look at the opponent that we lost to. You think about their offseason activity last year. Look, they spent a lot of money, but it was on, extending their core. And as our team's life cycle continues to transition to what I would call a little bit more of a mature state, we certainly hope to be in that world as well, because those are good problems to have. So it is a little bit of a balance. That being said, I don't think anything precludes us from adding external talent if it is appropriate. At times, maybe we'll have to be creative with our contract structuring or our sequencing, but that's something that we're certainly up to the task to do.
Thanks, Jake. Doug, go ahead.
Andrew, following up on that a little bit, as you mentioned off the top, last offseason was leaning more towards the offensive side of the ball. But with what you did in adding a draft pick like Jedrick Wills on offense, who was an impact player right away, and two big free agent signings in Austin and Jack, who were impact guys right away, is that the kind of thing you could do on defense this offseason at that level, that kind of impact? Or is that too much because of maybe some of the other financial things you have to do with other guys on the team?
No, Doug, I'd say it's possible. I wouldn't necessarily say that that's what we're going to do, but I really wouldn't exclude anything. I wouldn't limit us or pigeonhole us into any type of strategic approach. Part of it is because we still have a fair amount of planning to do. But look, we're always going to be in full tilt boogie mode to add to the roster and make sure that we can advance the ball and improve the team and win more games than we did the previous season.
And just specifically again on Grant Delpit, Antoine Winfield was picked the selection after Grant in the draft last year. He made all rookie teams, started every game for Tampa, was an impact guy on their defense. Did you ever look at him and think like, that's what a healthy Grant Delpit maybe could have done for us, a young playmaking safety? And or is that what Grant Delpit can do for this defense down the road when he does get back healthy?
No, I don't know that I ever really thought about comparing, Grant and Antoine. Antoine's obviously a really good football player, and we certainly liked him a lot coming out as well. We've really been just more focused on the guys in our building, in our organization, and obviously making sure that we have an environment where Grant can be as healthy as possible. We selected him because we believe in him and think that he can have a really strong career here, and we're looking forward to him getting back on the field in 2021.
Thank you, Doug. Mary Kay Cabot, go ahead.
Yeah, Andrew, because the nerve generation for Grady Williams is such an uncertain thing, I guess my question is, do you guys kind of have to plan as though maybe he's not going to make it back 100% and look at that as a priority position for you? And also tied into that, does it impact whether or not you want to bring back Terrence? And what did you get from Terrence this year in relief of Grady?
So to Grady specifically, Mary Kay, that's not really in our thought process right now. He's doing a nice job coming along. Again, with all major injuries, you never know how it can progress or what turns it can take. But that's not that's really not something that's really at the front of my mind at this point. In terms of the position, can never have enough corners. You really can't, and then especially in this defense. So that's always an area that we would want to be deep going into the year. They're hard to find, but it's obviously an area that we want to continue to be deep. And then to Terrence specifically, I thought he did a really nice job, probably playing a bigger role than he would have anticipated coming into the year. I thought he did a nice job holding his own. He performed for us. He's fantastic in the building, and really my hat's off to what he was able to accomplish this year.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mary Kay. We'll sneak in one final question. Jeff Shadell.
Hey, Andrew, I think you're well groomed to get this job, but what did you learn your first year on the job that will make you a better going forward?
That's a great question, Jeff. It's actually something that I've reflected upon a lot as the year has progressed. I think the number one thing, Jeff, has been how much time is spent with what I would call crisis management. And I realized that we obviously had a unique season just dealing with everything COVID related. But if it's not COVID, it will always be something else. And there's some days where it feels like you do football in between all the crisis management, so to speak. But there's just a number of different what I would say maybe issues that I probably underappreciated how much time it would take to be a part of resolving them that cross your desk on a daily or weekly basis. And so I think I have a much better sense of that rhythm, going into year two than perhaps I did, going into year one. So that's probably the biggest one.